I need cobblestone. Let me just use up my snow here, if I can. Howard says, I don't remember this, but Wiki says Julia was also broken. Yes, she was. And they meet again, both deciding nothing is as important as their love for Big Brother. I don't know if that's what they really decided. I think they decided that it wasn't worth going back to whatever it was they were doing before, going back to their previous affair. Like they had given up, I think, is not that they actually love Big Brother, but they gave up on everything else, I think is how I would describe it. Yeah, they briefly meet again, but they couldn't come up with enough enthusiasm to do anything. Alright, we need a lot more of everything. I mean, my impression was not that they love Big Brother, is that they don't even know what love means anymore. Because they're like so psychologically traumatized. I just realized I need cobblestone. One, two, three, four. One for stairs, and half more for stairs. Uh, I don't know if it's gonna cause any controversy, but I guess it's too late to go back now. So in China, relatively recently, there's been the whole Jack Ma thing. I don't know if you've been following that, Hava, or if I don't know what kind of news you get. Jack Ma was the founder of Alibaba. Hava says, I think the story hits harder when you know Orwell was a big political writer. Wouldn't have had the same impact if Hemingway, for example, wrote it word for word. Hmm. What do you mean? Do you mean Orwell doesn't usually write like that? Or that you think Orwell was thinking about something that Hemingway would not have been thinking about? As it is not just a cool story, it's something that he feels strongly about. Okay, I get it. Yeah. As and is an expert in. I mean, look, torture has existed in human history, even quite recently, and the effects on how it breaks a person is documented, right? If you want to find out, you can find out. And obviously, it's not good. It's not pleasant, and I object strongly to torture. And like, if Orwell feels strongly against torture, I mean, I agree. I was there. I was well, I mean that when an expert in the field gives you a warning, you pay attention more than if your kid's daycare does. Well, yeah. Yeah, but if they're right, they're right. Um, crap. Oh, what are you? Yeah, I see what you mean, however. Okay, where's my mouse cursor? There. Um, as I said, it's like thinking about real world regimes. Yeah, Harvard says sorry, so Jack Ma. Yeah, Jack Ma. I don't think Jack Ma was actually tortured. I think he just had to study a lot of books and lessons. So Jack Ma was the founder of Alibaba. Alibaba was kind of like Amazon, right? Like a platform for buying and selling things. Anyway, at one point, he wanted to get into finance, and the government put a stop into it. By finance, I mean like he wants to get into like payments. But the way he was going about it, he was creating a sort of like a closed ecosystem where if he continued, he would eventually control even things like money supply. Because like, if he started giving loans on his platform, so people already bought and sold stuff on his platform. If he started giving loans, then he would have control over the money supply and things like that. Anyway, the Communist Party of China decided that he should not be allowed to create like a closed ecosystem that would eventually like be basically like a country online, like a nation within a nation, if that makes sense. Like imagine if you have like one company like Google or Amazon or something, and they had like the marketplace, they had the banks, and then they provide insurance, and then and so we add all together, they become like a country in itself, like an online country. And there's been other fiction about this stuff, about how mega corporations just start creating de facto countries online, right? So anyway, the party stopped him, and he disappeared from public view for a while, and nobody knew what happened. And then, after a while, he kind of reappeared with a completely changed outlook. He became like a philanthropist. He stopped trying to make money, and he like did charity work. And so, if you look at it superficially, right? Maybe they took him into the Ministry of Love and gave him the whole ministry treatment, and then they changed his mind, and then he comes out a different person. So, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that the appearance fits the story. I'm not saying that it actually is the same story. I'm just saying that like the evidence fits the hypothesis. There could be other hypotheses about what actually happened, but it does fit the hypothesis that he was somehow taken away and re-educated against his will. I don't think that's what happened though. Um, like I don't think the Chinese Communist Party is that blunt in their methods. And he seems okay. He doesn't seem injured. He's not missing any fingers or limbs or anything like that. There's no like permanent injuries that anybody can see. I think what he actually got was basically like lessons. Lessons on the dangers of monopoly and things like that. But you know, I'm just saying, I don't think he entirely volunteered for those lessons. But you can, I guess you can argue, like, was that correct? Was it correct to give Jack Ma those lessons? Because if, you know, if like a Google, as I said, if Google or Amazon did similar things, there would be antitrust actions to break up the companies. So it's not like the West would allow that to happen either. Howard says we've seen that a lot in the news here. Chinese Canadian citizens blackmailed into following the party line more. I mean, I don't know if blackmail is the right word. Um, but they would come and they would try to convince you. There is that. Howard says AI overview. Chinese police stations in Canada, Canadian authorities, including the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, have been investigating reports of unofficial Chinese police stations operating in Canada. I mean, they're not police stations. They're not doing anything overtly illegal. But they are, like, talking to people. These outposts are allegedly involved in persuading Chinese nationals to return to China and may be involved in harassment, but there are no confirmed reports of physical kidnappings of citizens. Yeah, so the Chinese, they're not blunt, right? They're quite subtle about it. But here's the thing, however, here's the other side of it. As general knowledge, people like me, I guess, it is known that some people who have embezzled money in China against the, like, breaking the law, embezzling money, they would escape overseas, and Canada is one of these places where they would escape to, and the Canadian government would take them in as refugees or give them political asylum, but they would bring money in. And the accusation from the Chinese side is that the Canadian government is basically taking stolen money stolen from China, and giving these people who are criminals asylum. That's what the Chinese side say. And anecdotally, I'm not gonna accuse anyone in public or anything like that, but the stories are that yes, in fact, some of these people, it's not entirely clear where their money came from, and it's not entirely clear that their money came from legitimate places. And so the Chinese police, they don't have the authority to go over there and arrest people, but they will try to make contact and they try to talk to them and try to persuade them to go back and give the money back. So it's, you know, it's kind of true. But I'm, like, from what I know, again anecdotally, from what people say, a lot of these people actually did steal money. I mean, even in New Zealand, we have known a friend of a friend who, like, the wife went back to China, but she was not allowed to leave. And the police told her that her husband had embezzled money, and they suspected that she was an accomplice, right? And the wife, she said she didn't know anything about this, but she did call her husband. Her husband then went over to China, and then they let the wife go, but the husband stayed there for a little while, and then the husband came back. And they didn't really say specifically what happened, but the assumption is that the husband gave the money back and then they let him go. And this is like a friend of a friend. So on the one hand, yeah, the Chinese might send police or like, police but in a civilian status, and they'll send them to come talk to you, ask you questions, and maybe ask you, hey, do you want to come back and give the money back? We know you stole it. Uh, I mean, oh, I need to like stop streaming soon. Howard says, assuming that's true, why didn't he get charged? I would hope that's what would happen in US, UK, Europe, etc. You mean why didn't he get charged over in China? I think they might be. I mean, they had an ongoing case against him. Howard says, there's no downside to him stealing. If caught, he can just return it. The thing is, if he was threatened with prison, he might not go back, right? I mean, he might just leave his wife there. So they treat it more leniently as an incentive to turn themselves in, because if like the idea is, if you turn yourself in, we won't punish you harshly, and so that's the incentive for turning yourself in. Presumably, if he didn't turn himself in, they would have held his wife indefinitely. How is this? Sure, that makes sense, I guess. Yeah. I mean, look, I don't know how I feel about it, right? On the one hand, if you steal money, they're gonna come after you. Okay, fair enough. Sending people to a different country to talk to people? I mean, that's a lot. That's going a step above what most countries do, right? On the other hand, did they really steal money? I think they did. I mean, it looks like they did. So I don't know. I don't know what to say about it. I don't know what else to... I mean, all I can say is whenever I come across these stories, in the end, like at the end of the story, it's always that they actually did something. Like I've never come across a story where somebody actually like didn't actually do anything and they were prosecuted. How's it sounds like they signed an NDA? I mean, it's embarrassing for them, man. They don't want to admit that they were thieves, right? And so like they won't tell you unless I don't know, unless you're really close or anything. But I mean, they didn't say they weren't thieves. So if you ask them, and they won't say they didn't steal it, and so the implication is that they did. Howard says, and that seems to be a common thing too regarding this type of thing. The person involved never seems to come clean to the authorities, media over here. Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, if they've moved to Canada, they want to stay there. They don't want to admit that, hey, we lied to you about the prosecution. We lied to you about the political asylum thing. Actually, we were actually thieves. So they won't admit it over there either. So if they made it to Canada and if they've been allowed to stay in Canada, they're not gonna jeopardize that by admitting they did something. which is, fair enough. You like you have a right to remain silent, right? But yeah, I guess I'll put it this way: the Chinese government, they're capable of doing a lot, and whether they do the right thing or the wrong thing is really up to them. And I know, your position is, well, that doesn't make it really dangerous. I guess so. Yeah, I guess so. But then again, a lot of governments have a lot of power, and it's really only up to them what they do, right? Anyway, I should stop streaming now for today. Jack Ma also doesn't say what actually happened to him. So, I mean, the fact that he doesn't say is strange too. Was he tortured? I don't know. I don't think so. But how do you know? He doesn't say it? Nobody says anything? How is this suspicious? Mighty suspicious. I don't know, Hava. Like, what the hell is going on? Like, like all these stories, I never actually hear anyone saying they got beat up, right? Nobody says, like, they would invite you into the police station, they would give you a cup of tea, and they would talk to you. And nobody ever says, oh, they beat me up. Nobody ever says that. They just say, oh, they gave me a cup of tea and they talked to me. And and they'll say, oh, it was really scary. I'm like, did they do anything physical? And they're like, no. Alan says, oh, I don't imagine that. I think it's blackmail. Yeah. Well, I mean, blackmail. They got something on you, and technically, you are wrong. You are in the wrong, and they have evidence against you. And so then, I don't know, is it blackmail or is it just like if you did steal the money, and if they have evidence that you stole the money, and they tell you to give it back or else they'll charge you, is it blackmail or is it just, you know, I don't know. Anyway, I'm gonna end the stream here for today. All right, see you next time.